I just kept going in the sand and the sweat and the sun, and just I just kept going, kept jumping, kept trying to get out of these chains. First time I was in front of camera was the screen test, March 27th, 1976. I know, it's one of the very few dates that are emblazoned in my memory, because it was such a monumental day for me. And the process was very unfamiliar. And I think, you know, in looking back, having come from the theater, I feel like I took to it pretty well. You know, David Green, in one of my auditions, the first audition where I met David Green, the director, he told me later that he was very close to throwing me out of the office, because in my first pass at the text, at the sides for Kunta, the scene the audition scene that we were reading, I was projecting to the back of the room. I mean, that was my training. I was a sophomore in theater school at USC. I didn't know about acting for the camera. And God bless him, David took the time to explain to me the difference between acting on stage and acting for the camera. And he said that the way I turned around the note was, in his words, remarkable. He saw immediately that this is a kid that I can work with. That's what he said. I knew immediately I could work with you. I had no concept about ratings or market share or any of that stuff. I didn't feel an ounce of pressure at all, because I was unaware that there was any. And I think Stan Margulies and David Wolper and Alex were really terrific about protecting me. If they felt that there was information or a situation that was going to be injurious to me, I'm certain they would have circled the wagons around me and protected me from it. But I was a 19-year-old kid. I was having the time of my life. I was being paid to be an actor, and I got to act with legends, people that I had admired my entire life. What could be bad about that? And I get now that, you know, those first 4 hours meant a lot in terms of the success of the series, that if people didn't connect with young Kunta Kinte, then there was really no reason to tune in for hour 5. But that was what the part was needing, was crying out for, was asking for. And I think my own sort of naivete at the time was an absolute perfect match. David Green, the director of the first 3 hours, was just a terrific man and a wonderful director, and he was a great director for me, you know, as an actor working for the first time in the business. He was very inventive, and we did a lot of talking, but just a lot of play acting, a lot of playing. So David talked me through the basic layout that he was seeing for the sequence. But what I loved was those indelible images of Kunta jumping and flailing in slow motion. Now, I had no idea how it was going to be cut together, but you know, he just, in the moment, in the filming, he just kept me going, and he wouldn't let me stop beyond exhaustion. And I was game, you know, take 20, you know, you want another, whatever. Again, I was just so excited to be doing this and felt very up for it and up for anything. I mean, wanted to do my own stunts, and I just didn't want to let go. It was just so juicy. So David, after the capture, and he had this sequence in his head, but he didn't share with me all that he was going to do in the editing room, and so I just kept going in the sand and the sweat and the sun, and I just kept going, kept jumping, kept trying to get out of these chains. And The sequence as it's cut together is just brilliant because in sort of a montage of imagery, you see this wild stallion being subdued, and it's beautiful and terrifying all at the same time.
You said there was symbolism as well.
Well, like the symbolism, of course, for any person, certainly of color, and any person who has feeling, the idea of being captured and put in chains holds tremendous resonance. Certainly for Black people, I think for most of us. I think Roots proves that for most of us, we all resonate with the what slavery does to a human being. What slavery did to families and to the psyche of Black people in America. So on a symbolic level, the filming of those scenes was really, it was deeply emotional. Deeply emotional, not as emotional as the Middle Passage, but just Kunta's capture. That's the beginning of the end, right? That's the beginning of the end. It is the line that gets crossed, and beyond that point, we can never go home again. And so when you look at the trajectory of the life of this character, you know, that's a very pivotal moment, that capture, because his life is forever changed, forever. The production design team had recreated the hold of the ship in a warehouse outside of Savannah, and it was 3 days on the schedule. The shooting of the Middle Passage, the interior of the hold of the slave ship. Yeah, I mean, I genuinely believe that there was grace available to me, that young kid, in as much as the ancestors really came in and protected me and helped me get through the recreation, because I was fully invested in everything that we were doing. The Middle Passage is really interesting in a lot of respects, because when you think that everyone, all of us African Americans, are descended from those who survived, and when you think that on average it was 5 to 6 months of every day living in the bowels of a ship, in your own filth, day after day after day for 6 months. And it was only the strongest of the strong who could survive that journey, and that they are our forefathers. That's a phenomenal legacy to inherit. There isn't an awful lot of honor or glory in being the sons of slaves and daughters of slaves until you have an opportunity to dig deeper beneath the veneer of what that looks like. And it was Roots that gave us an opportunity to look underneath the veneer of slavery to the humanity that was involved in slavery on both sides of the equation, and really see the dignity and the strength of character and the honor that was most definitely present in those people who were enslaved. And it gave modern Black Americans a real opportunity to, to feel good about ourselves. Look, it's the story, the saga of an American family. The story of slavery in America is white America's story as much as it is black America's story. And I think both sides learned an awful lot about ourselves in the process of the telling of that story. As I'm sure you probably know by now, we had to shoot it twice. And again, being that young kid who wanted to, do all the stunts, that was a scene that I was really looking forward to because it was about action. By the time that we left Georgia and came to Los Angeles to shoot hour 4, there wasn't a lot of action to do, not a lot of running and jumping, and the physicality of Kunta was really really beautiful for me. He was this warrior, and part of what we witness in those first 3 hours is just this beautiful young warrior being in the prime of his life, broken down, and yet and still maintaining contact with that essential truth about who he was. And so the physicality of it, of all of that, was really, really important. The scenes in the Middle Passage, the scenes when he's being auctioned off, and that one little, he leads them sort of on a wild goose chase, and you see the intelligence in this kid, in that he surrenders the chain, he gives it to Fiddler. He's made it very clear that nobody here could catch him, could match him in a physical sense, and under different circumstances, it would be on. But I know what's going on here, and so I'm giving the chain to the black person in the circle, to the person who looks like me. I get that this is not going to change for me, but I've made a point. And so again, all that was just great in the acting. It was just really a lot of fun to play. So by the time we got to Los Angeles, there wasn't a lot of that left to do. And so I was looking forward to this scene, but I had no idea how we were going to shoot it, and the physical reality of it when it came time to actually put it on film was really daunting. I mean, I had my back turned to this guy who was an expert with the whip, but I just found it very, very difficult, in fact impossible, to stand there and allow somebody with a whip in their hand to take shots at me. And he was really good with the whip. As it turns out, I found out later, we were unable to shoot the scene that day because I was just anticipating the lash. He was supposed to be just sort of like laying it in. But when he lets go, that tip is moving pretty fast. 120 miles an hour is what they say. And I just could not relax enough to be in the scene. I was in the consciousness of, wow, this isn't comfortable to me at all. And standing there on an apple box with my hands above my head, sort of strung up, it didn't work. It wasn't working for me. So they brought the guy back, about a week later, and I spent the morning with him and got more comfortable with his technical prowess, and it worked just great the second time around. But that was, the reality was much different than what I imagined it would be. It's like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. It is an unnatural act to stand with your back to a person with a whip in their hand and allow them to take shots at you. It's just, it doesn't make sense to the mind. I think of all of the moments in the series, that's my favorite. And it's a moment where Kunta never opens his eyes. I mean, Kunta's moment was the moment before. Once they cut him down, it's all Fiddler. It's all Fiddler. And Lou is absolutely transcendent in that moment, because the the compassion that just comes pouring out of that man. And, you know, you have to remember that there was a hierarchy that was imposed on us in slavery. And there were slaves who worked in the fields, and there were slaves who worked in the house. And Fiddler had risen within that hierarchy to a place of privilege. And he was given the responsibility of training a wild, fresh off the boat African. And all of the privilege that he had attained was on the line, on a very personal level for him. And so he had been really hard on Kunta throughout the course of that tutelage. And to see Fiddler go where he went with that, to see Lou take that character in that direction, in that moment, and really fully embrace Kunta and everything that Kunta stood for, and you get the sense of loss for Fiddler, that his opportunity to be a Kunta has long passed him by, but he values and treasures the strength of character, the wildness in Kunta. And it's just very powerful. It's a powerful, powerful moment on a lot of levels for a lot of reasons. I had no idea whether this was going to be successful. My expectations were that I would be going back to USC in the fall, and having made a little money and had a little professional experience. I mean, a phenomenal, first job. My very first day as an actor, Cicely Tyson played my mother, Maya Angelou played my grandmother. That was pretty damn good. That's not too bad. That's not shabby at all. Just really taken under the wing of Jitu Kumbuka, Louis Gossett Jr., Harry Rhodes, all of these people, they treated me like a peer, like the new kid, like a youngster, but welcomed me into the acting profession in a very gracious manner. And it was an amazing experience, but I had no expectations beyond that. And was, certainly not a part of those conversations at network level about, what it meant going forward. So where were you when you watched Roots for the first time? And I wasn't surprised, but there was just a flood of, I wasn't born yet. And I was really amazed at how many stories, because they were great stories, like I was a bartender in Nome, Alaska, and the bar was packed every night and silent. I mean, everybody was watching. So there were some great stories, and how many young people, how many adults who saw it in school, for whom it was required in history. A lot of people were too young to have really understood it, have memories of certain images and imagery, but have gone back and seen it perhaps in school. Amazing stories of people who have shared it with their children. Just pretty cool. But, a lot of people are of the age now where they were not a part of the viewing audience in January of 1977. And it's remarkable to see that there's a whole generation of people for whom that phenomenal aspect of Roots as cultural explosion in America, as those 8 nights unfolded and the audience grew, and then it was the national conversation. It was what everyone talked about. And then sort of the national obsession with genealogy to follow. There's a whole generation, almost 2 generations of Americans who were not old enough to have experienced that, but for whom roots is a part of their consciousness, which is, I think, a testament to not just what good TV it was, but the power of the narrative in the American story. It's just an essential aspect of who we are. I believe that there is a continuum that goes from the slave trade through Reconstruction in the South, post-Civil War, through the Great Migration from the South to the North and then to the West of black people, through the Civil Rights Movement, right, in the 50s and 60s, roots in the 70s, and Barack Obama in becoming elected president, and in this decade. There's a through line. One doesn't happen without the other. One just does not happen without the other. There's an absolute continuum of energy, of activity, and Roots is on that timeline. Culture is essential for the evolution of mankind. Culture has to be a part of the equation. Yes, there are laws. Yes, there is sport, but art, culture, we would not be the high-level beings that we are without the ability to express in that dimension. So, absolutely, it's the humanity that that the story of Alex Haley's family expresses. The themes that are present in Roots are universal themes. The importance of family and families staying together, and what happens to families when they are torn apart. That indomitable nature of the human spirit is expressed through Kunta Kinte. The fact that he held on to his identity long after he accepted, in their eyes, the new name that was given to him, his absolute insistence upon preserving his story and telling it to his children and impressing upon them the importance of continuing that story with their children and their children's children, and letting them know where they came from. Those are themes that everybody can relate to. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're from a town in Wisconsin or Alabama or, you know, in Auschwitz. Everybody can relate to those ideas. It's really interesting. I went to a Jewish bar mitzvah of a young boy. It was like the second. I've only been to 2. One was your son's, and I went to one a couple of weekends ago, and it was incredibly moving because the young man being bar mitzvahed, his father is Jewish, his mother is black, her family's from Jamaica. And this was in a temple in Hollywood that Martin Luther King had spoken at. And this was MLK Day weekend. And the readings on that day were from the book of Exodus. So there were all of these factors sort of converging in this ceremony. And I sat there just like weeping at the significance of all of this. And it took me a couple of days to figure out what that was about, why I had that very intense reaction. And I realized that black people, like Jewish people, have slavery as an intense part of their history. What black people don't have is that sense of tradition that binds them together, that is around faith and family. And that ceremony of bar mitzvah, of actually welcoming a young man into the community of adulthood, is a rite of passage that African Americans don't have. But it's exactly like the manhood training ceremony that Kunta went through. So black people have, for the most part in this country, been divorced from those cultural ceremonies and rituals that make up the fabric of continuity. We have been denied that, and as a consequence, we're fractured. That cohesion is absent, and that's a very, very powerful thing to realize, to recognize that cohesion for us is the legacy of slavery, that's what's really been denied. Yeah, I mean, Roots brought up a lot of emotion for a lot of people, both black and white. And you know, there are so many stories, more than a few stories about, you know, fights on the playground in schools. There was a desire at some point on the part of ABC to do what they could to mitigate, you know, some of that tension. It's like, you know, when you have a scab that's healing and it comes off to get the air to it, and you know, and it actually heals better the next time around. That's just a part of the healing process. Roots was it was the pulling off of that scab of this wound that had been self-inflicted on the psyche of America, and so in the pulling off of that scab, you know, there was some pus that came up, you know, and there was some blood, but that was necessary. It was absolutely necessary. So what ABC thought that they would do was they brought the actors who played the two characters in that scene, the actor who played Kunta and the actor who played the overseer, Vic Morrow and LeVar Burton. They brought them together to sit on that couch with David Hartman to prove that there was no animus, there was no animosity between us two, and of course there wasn't. But it was, I thought it was the responsible thing to do. On one hand, I thought, well, how ludicrous is that? But, you know, thinking back on it now, I think that was probably a very responsible thing for the network to have at least attempted to do, to just sort of, you know, remind everybody that it was a television show. And yes, acknowledge that it was bringing up a lot of stuff for people, and to remind people that it was really still important as we went through all of those emotions that it brought up, to remember that, you know, we still need to be human beings to one another. We still need to exercise, you know, civility in the discourse. When I was a kid, and in every history unit I ever had in school, slavery was always referred to as an economic institution. It was an economic institution. It was an economic engine upon which this country was built. The human cost was never a part of that module in school. We got schooled through Roots about the human side of that equation, the human element, and what that cost was to thousands of souls, and what the cost was. There was a cost benefit, but there was a cost deficit as well, and we'd never contemplated that cost deficit before. And it would have been impossible to contemplate a present where there was a black man sitting in the highest office in the land, had we not had the courage to examine. Introspection, self-examination was absolutely critical in order for us to come to a place where we could elect a black man to be the president of this country. No question about it. In my mind, at least. Roots has given me so much, you know. It was my first job. It was my first professional audition. It introduced me to, you know, to to that part of myself that I love so much. It gave me a career, it gave me a life, it gave me so much. If I am alive, you know, all those years from now, and I'm seen as the sort of the bearer of that torch, carrying that flame, I'm really good with that, because it's given me so much. It's made the life I enjoy possible, and I thank Alex Haley every day in my heart for making me a part of history, and such. I mean, Kunta Kinte is an icon that represents freedom all over this planet. I was in South America last year in a village that I had visited 25 years ago with the American Sportsman. And 25 years ago, Roots hadn't been shown in the country of Suriname. When I returned to Suriname last year, Kunta is a national hero there. They write, there's a national song about Kunta Kinte in the country of Suriname. That's phenomenal to me, that this character has taken on that kind of significance for people all around the world. Blows my mind, really. Would never have been able to anticipate that. And yet I get it. I understand it. When I step outside of myself and try and look objectively at what was accomplished through those 8 nights of television, it's the absolute best use of moving pictures and sound that we can achieve. And I genuinely believe that this is a very powerful medium, the medium of entertainment. And Roots hit the mark. It did more than entertained. It served as a vehicle for enlightenment and empowerment. And you just don't get the opportunity to do that every day, no matter what field it is you're talking about. Nichelle Nichols, for me, represented a future that included me, and that was really important. I'm a child of the television era, and I'm old enough to remember when black people on TV were very rare. And as a lifelong science fiction fan, Star Trek was huge for me. And having a black woman on the bridge of the Enterprise was, I cannot adequately communicate, I don't believe, the importance of my kids growing up in a completely different world, where they see themselves reflected in the popular culture all of the time, in magazines, on television, in movies. It is a very different reality for this generation and the generations going forward. When I was growing up, it was rare and uncommon to have such wonderful imagery reflected back to me of people who looked like me. So Gene's vision of the future was huge because it was an inclusive one. And to grow up and become a part of that mythos, and then to represent for people who are physically challenged what Nichelle, as a black woman, represented for me as a kid, is, again, I don't think I have the words. It's part of that continuity that I like to talk about, that, you know, if you can get into the groove of life as it unfolds, it's seemingly miraculous how things end up, right? And my life has always unfolded like a miracle. It's just like that, and at least it feels like that to me. And I guess maybe that's part of why I've responded to my life the way I have, because it just does feel miraculous when you sit and look at it, you know. My very first episode as a director on Star Trek, I had the opportunity to bring in a friend of mine, Dr. Mae Carol Jemison, who is the first African-American woman in space, flew on the shuttle. And I knew how much Nichelle's presence on Star Trek influenced her decision to become first a scientist and an engineer, and then an astronaut, right? And so I brought those two together for the first time. I invited Nichelle to come to the set so she could meet Mae, and so Mae could meet her. That's how important it is. There is no Mae Jemison without Nichelle Nichols. Nichelle was there to provide the inspiration for the young girl that Mae was, to actually believe in the possibility that that existed for her. Do you understand what I'm saying? It is our ability to imagine. That's what sets us apart from other life forms, right? Human beings have the ability to imagine. And if you can imagine it, you can manifest it. That's my belief. I believe that there is some kid who grew up watching those episodes of Star Trek and kept seeing Kirk pull out his communicator from that Velcroed place on his hip because there are no pockets in the future, apparently. That's what I think one of the things that we've learned from Star Trek. And Kirk always pulls out that communicator, he flips it open, he calls the ship. That kid grew up, he became a scientist, he became a designer of product, and today we have the flipped cell phone. That which we can imagine, we can manifest. That's how it works. That's how it works. So the inspirational nature of art in the trajectory of humanity is incalculable because it, you know, and especially science fiction literature. That's why I love it so much. Science fiction literature dares to ask and insists upon us asking what I believe are two of the most important words in combination in language. What if? What if? What if we could go to the moon? Well, enough people focus on that question and they begin to come up with answers. And before long, you've got the Apollo program and we're going to the moon, right? And then when you bring in a real pivotal inspirational figure who actually throws down the gauntlet like John Kennedy did and said, you know what? Let's plant a flag. Let's see if we can't get there, right? We have the technology, we have the know-how, we have the resources. Let's focus on this a little, people, right? Human beings, the president said in his speech last night, when we work together, we are capable of anything. The trick is to get us to work together and not at cross purposes. And I think that's one of the things that culture allows us to do. It allows us to see beyond those limitations that we experience as differences and focus more on how we are alike more than we're not alike. There are always challenges. There are always challenges. And that's what makes progress sweet, you know? When you come up against something that needs to be changed and people need to be reminded, well, wait, well, why? Why is that? Oh, well, yeah, on further examination, there's no really good reason for it. And, you know, so Nichelle wasn't able to be the beneficiary of the kind of change that she helped to initiate, but I was. And there are changes that I am certain I will never experience in this lifetime that I believe I am helping to make possible for future generations. That's just the way it works. It's what we sign on for when we come in. You know, you work as hard as you can, and you may not always see the fruits of your labor, but it's important to know that that labor pays off. I believe of everything that I have been blessed enough to accomplish in this life, nothing is more important than Reading Rainbow. Again, that sense of inspiration and hope. First of all, I just believe that every human being deserves to be literate in at least one language. That's just, you know, it's like, it's on the list for me. Clean water, air, shelter, food, literacy. It's like, okay, inalienable right. The connection, I think, for me, the connection with the written word is an elemental part of being human, because it is in that written word that we have access to the continuity. That is the fabric, the underpinning of humanity, right? And when you get a child and light that spark in them at that really important juncture, then I think you're really doing something, you know? You're really serving a good purpose. And it's become very important to me to be able to do that and to continue that work. My mother was an English teacher, and I know fully well the value that my relationship to literature, to books, to the written word, the immeasurable value that it's brought me in my life. And not just me, I mean, I see evidence of it everywhere, every day. And so I fight for that. I want that. I want that for generations to come. And as, you know, as things evolve and change, you know, I want to be a part of how we continue to change the ways in which we reach kids at that very critical juncture. You know, again, everything happens for a reason, and life as it unfolds is pretty miraculous. When I think about the fact that my ancestors were denied the ability to learn how to read as slaves in America, and that I have grown up and become, for many, a champion of literacy, it just makes perfect sense. Of course, I get it, you know? Everything happens purposefully, I think. There aren't any accidents. I don't believe in the idea of accidental incidents. God's too great. There are way too many things that we just cannot explain that go on as a matter of course, you know, in this life. And so, you know, I've learned to just accept the miracles and be grateful. Gratitude is a huge part of life for me, being grateful for everything, even the disappointments. Some people say especially the disappointments, and I wouldn't disagree. I'm equally grateful for those things that I perceived at the time as slights or setbacks, because in their own way they've helped shape the person that I am today. From my perspective, in a search for that vessel that kept us together, it became Christianity. And it was that promise that Christianity offered of a life better than this one. This one is hell. That's a done deal. But there's a reward for having gone through this in the afterlife, in heaven. And I think that for Black people in this country, that allegiance to God is part of our DNA because it was part of the survival mechanism that was necessary in order to endure slavery. So, however it comes across, that relationship to deity comes honestly for Black people in this country, because it was all that kept us going.